Here's a fun little side project. These fuel petcocks, they're all RZ350. This one's been monkeyed with. Somebody switched out this fitting. This one is extremely dirty and melted or something chewed on over here. I'm going to turn 3 of these into modified fuel petcocks, like this one is. Before I modify those other ones, I'm going to take this one out of this tank. It's been in here for about 3 years now, and verify that the epoxy has not degraded. Yikes. You had to spill fuel on my hand, didn't you? When I modified this one years ago, I epoxied the fuel strainer down here. So let's check it out. You would think this epoxy would have softened up, right? It looks to me like it's held up just fine. It's quite hard. What does it look like inside there? There's no vacuum diaphragm, and there's a bunch of epoxy in here. This side never sees fuel, but it certainly hasn't poked its way through, has it? Looks all nice and fresh. This part has been epoxied in here. And I would say that epoxy has swelled up. It feels hard, but I'm sure that I surfaced this flat. See the lip? I got home from the 2-stroke extravaganza and parked this bike in the garage, and it proceeded to leak fuel out all over. I run these lawnmower Briggs & Stratton type fuel petcocks on this bike, and it's way up in here. I have to reach my hand up in there to turn it. It's quite difficult to do. And these things used to last quite a long time. Nowadays, maybe they're cheaper, junkier, made in some faraway country item that doesn't use a proper O-ring or something, but it's extremely difficult to get in there. Oh, here, I can demonstrate. It doesn't look that hard here when it's off the bike, but reaching your hand way up inside under the tank, through the frame and all that, it's quite difficult. It's just very sticky. And I think I had it all the way shut off and it still leaked. So I believe it just failed, and it hasn't been on there very long at all. So that's bringing this fuel petcock mod repair thing front and center again. I think I showed earlier how this JB weld, the original JB weld that I put inside this part, had seemingly swelled up, and there's like a lip on here now. I called JB Weld and I spoke to a gal there and mentioned that I had done this fuel petcock mod probably 3 years ago, might be more like 2, but I think it's closer to 3, and it held up. It especially held up quite well in here, where this is going to be submersed in fuel all the time. I don't know about this part. But anyway, I mentioned that this had swelled up a little bit, and the gal was quite surprised that the original JB weld held up as well as it did. So I asked, what do I need to use for something that's going to be submersed in fuel all the time? And she said this. I asked about this tank weld stuff, but she suggested this stuff. This petcock was still working, but I want to change this out, so I'm either going to have to grind it out, but right now I'm going to see if this old original JB weld will just pop out of here. Kind of an interesting experiment. I just cracked it. There's a big chunk. There's one piece, another piece down in there, but there's still more in here I need to get out. Trying not to damage the part. I think I successfully got all the epoxy out of this thing using various tools to scrape and chisel and pry it out. I was going to go into production on this modification, but I think I'm just going to do one more. I'm going to repair this one and then modify one more. I'm taking this dude apart. Is this a good O-ring? I can glue it back together, right? Yeah, it's two halves. That's not bad. This piece is hard as a rock, where this one is nice and rubbery still. I think that was probably a new part. I hope I have replacement parts. I guess I better go check my inventory. This thing's almost crispy. Here's the vacuum portion. This stuff will all go away. This is the one I reworked previously. I am not going to take all this JB weld out. This is the one I'm working on now. I don't know if I mentioned it. I am going to do a third one. The modification I'm doing will do away with that in the spring. I'll be putting a screw in here and then filling all of this area in with epoxy like I did on this one, and also this area. Although I don't know that that hole does anything. I don't know if it goes anywhere. Sure doesn't look like it. I see. It's some sort of interconnect between here and here. I don't know what it does. I would say that this area does not need to be filled in. Just all of this business. On to the modification. This is a 1032 flathead screw. I'm going to shorten it, make it very, very short, like about that short, and drop it in there. I'm also going to flip this over. This is an 832 screw. It's going to come back out. It's only there to prevent epoxy from going down into that port and clogging it up. Can you see the screw in there? See the little piece of screw head? That will go in there. This screw is going into this port. I can kind of barely thread it and it just sticks in there. Again, it's just blocking that hole down in there. I'm getting ready to fill these things up with epoxy right here. This is the one that was previously modified that I chipped the old epoxy out. This is some weird stuff. My understanding, looking at YouTube videos, is it cures extremely quick. I need to cut off a little piece and then knead it and then shove it into the cavity there. Just cut off that much. It's probably looks like more than enough to do all three of them, so maybe I will just do them all and hope for the best. Hope it doesn't epoxy my fingers together. Supposed to make it into a uniform color. Looks like we're getting there. Kind of a charcoal briquette looking thing. This one might work better because I'm able to push it in and the air can escape out where I've machined or cut out that wall in there. Please work. Gooey hands. If I do this, will they stick forever? Oh. It says set time 5 minutes, cure time 1 hour. It's probably only been like 3 minutes. Look at this. This stuff, it really hardens up quick. Wow. For this portion of the modification, I'm going to try something different. This is a fuel and storage tank repair kit from JB Weld. Sets in 5 minutes, cures in 4 hours. This is what it comes with. I called a second time and asked a guy on the phone. They want you to push one of these into the other one and knead it together to make it all uniform, and you're supposed to use the whole thing all in one shot. I asked the guy, can I just cut a corner off of each of the 2 parts and just mix small portions of it together, and he suggested not doing that. But I'm going to try it because I don't need this big giant thing, and besides the fact it's going to take me a minute to figure out or get this thing filled up just right. By the time I do that, this is extremely fast curing stuff. I won't be able to do 2 of these if I squish it all together into one pile. I don't think I need the fiberglass for this. I'm going to mix this stuff up over here, and then I'll switch over to this guy. Can I get it in there without making a big mess? Come on. Get off of there. Looks pretty good. Maybe I could have done 2 at once. I'm going to let it set for a minute, and then I have to take that screw out. It's down here. I can test with this stuff to see how fast it's curing. If I take that screw out too soon, the epoxy will flow down into the cavity and clog up the port where the fuel needs to flow. It's definitely curing, but it's still a little bit soft. I want to take this thing off and set it upside down and take the screw out, but I don't want this epoxy to flow out of there. I don't want it to flow down that way when I take the screw out. I don't think it will. This stuff is like wax paper here. Looks pretty good. I just did unit number 2. Let it sit for a few minutes, and then I'll move it over here to the curing station. I forgot one thing. I need to do epoxy this thing into this one, like I did that one 3 years ago. Oh well, I have to mix up another batch. I have to clean this thing. This putty type JB Weld is rock hard. This stuff has cured up, but I can put dents in it, so it needs to sit and cure for, I don't know, maybe tomorrow I can put one of these petcocks into the motorcycle. This is 180 sandpaper. I have a feeling I'm going to have to take this thing to the belt sander. I think I will. I'll take it to the belt sander and get it real close, and then I can touch it up over here and get this thing nice and flat. I did take this to the belt sander, but it's pretty tricky. You don't want to get carried away with that thing, because if you go down too far and get this thing off flat, it's not going to work right. So I'm very gently filing it down There's that piece, came off the edge, so I'm to the edge. Now maybe I'll go to the sandpaper. Getting there, just going very, very slow. Now, the good old porting tool. I'm trying to make a path for the fuel to flow out of that center port in the petcock through the handle into that valley right there. I think I just about have it. I'm going to cut just a little bit more material out of there and I think I'll be done. I just took these two with the belt sander. I obviously got a little close on that one on the left and touched it. I don't think it's going to hurt anything. Now the sanding phase. Let's see if I can do this without using the files. Just starting to hit. Looking good. Now I need to make that one and that one look like that one. I think I'm done with this one. All three of those are done now. One last thing, I just epoxied that fuel strainer into that petcock. This is the petcock I just reworked. It's going to go back on this bike. These California tanks have this fuel tank breather that went to the carbon canister or whatever that canister is. I just ordered a teeny little breather filter to put on that thing. So this tank will be coming back off very soon. There's a quick test. It's off right now. Straight up is on. There goes fuel. And this is reserve. And that's off. Looks like it's working. I'm not going to hook this up proper just yet. The tank is going to come back off to get that breather installed. This one will go on the yellow bike. This one is going to go on this bike. Off, reserve, and on. This is what your vacuum petcock looks like when the vacuum shutoff does not work. This is on reserve right now. It should not be flowing fuel. I'm draining this tank enough so that I can take this fuel petcock off and put my modified one on there. I did not have a new, what they call valve, that 5-hole rubber gasket inside here, so I'm hoping this one works. I'll find out. I'm leaving the secondary petcock on that one in case I have to shut the fuel off all the way if this thing leaks due to that valve in there. Okay, the new petcock is on. It's in the off position. Before I load this tank back up with fuel, let's give it a quick test. I would say in the off position there's no fuel coming through. This is on. It's in the on position right now. I don't hear anything coming out. It might need to go to reserve. I just switched it to reserve. We have fuel. back to on, turned it off because there's not enough fuel in there, and I just turned it back off. I think I'm going to go for a ride today. Back home from another nice ride. The fuel petcock worked as it should. I have it off right now. I didn't have any fuel starvation problems. No leaks. I pulled over a few times on the way up to make sure it wasn't leaking or something, but it seems to be working fine. So now the long test.